Hello everyone, it's me, Steve, and today I'm going to be talking about the EPA versus modified cars. Alright, so who is the EPA and what do they do? EPA is the United States Environmental Protection Agency, started by Richard Nixon in 1970 via executive order. It develops and enforces environmental regulations such as the Clean Air Act and other regulations that affect industry, what goes into the air, what certain companies and industries can dump into water, the regulation around power plants, how much emissions are allowed into the air, soil, and water runoff. Protects people and the environment from serious health risks. All right, and what are modified cars? According to the EPA, a modified street car is one that's emissions regulation system has been defeated or deleted, typically done by hobbyists that wish to race their car at a local racetrack or any racetrack on the weekends or participate in building competitions. So if you wanted to turn your street car, most people delete emission systems and other regular streetcar systems in order to turn them into race cars to get the horsepower and torque gains needed in order to race, along with reducing in weight and overall performance of the car. All right, so why is there a conflict between the EPA and people want to modify and race their cars? So the EPA doesn't want people to be able to modify their street cars so that they delete their emission system in order to gain in horsepower and performance. So this is a problem because the law as it is, or it's a regulation right now, says that it's illegal to turn your street car into a dedicated race car, meaning that is no longer street legal. It is only allowed to be driven on a racetrack or a dedicated racetrack or a closed circuit. So if there's a road race, you can race it on the road, but since it's a closed circuit, still considered a racetrack. So since there's no guarantee that people will drive these cars on the road, so anyone can buy performance parts, but there's no guarantee that the people buying them will only be using them for track-related racing. So in 2015, the EPA ruled that it was illegal to modify the emission systems of your car, thusly turning your street car into a race car. And the EPA has enforcement against high performance parts and their manufacturers. So I'm talking about turbochargers, superchargers, high flow exhaust pipes, meaning deleting the catalytic converter and any other emission systems in order to gain in order to allow the engine to breathe and flow the exhaust gases out, gaining in horsepower, and any other systems that directly affect the engine's emissions. All right, continued. So production race cars produced by automotive companies that are sold to customer racers are very expensive, cost a lot of money to maintain, and also not easily purchased by your average Joe. So as we can see, we have a 2021 BMW M4 that you can buy as a street car, and some would consider this a race car, but it abides by emission standards. It follows all the street safety regulations, and it's a street legal car. MSRP $71,800 US. And on the other side, we have the BMW M4 GT3 race car, which its MSRP is $530,000, and that's without shipping. So BMW, along with many other car manufacturers, have a customer racing division. So they create dedicated race cars. So this car doesn't have airbags. It has a full roll cage with completed 5 to 6 point harness. And you can see behind the passenger wheel, behind the wide wheel flare, is actually where the exhaust comes out. And you can kind of see the exhaust tip. So it has no emissions straight out of the turbochargers on that engine. The exhaust goes right out without any catalytic converters or emissions. Now, these cars are legal as they are today. Even in California, the state with the most strict emissions laws still allows for race cars like this to be raced on a track and skip over regulation. And I don't know about you, but there's not a whole lot of people that can afford a $530,000 car just so they can go on the weekends and enjoy their local racetrack and just have fun and go out and just do that as a weekend thing. So you can modify your street car and make it racetrack ready for around $10,000, most of the time under, with all the appropriate safety equipment included. So that's your roll cage, your harness, deleting the airbag and replacing it with a safer steering wheel, reducing the weight if you want to, all the necessary safety equipment, plus deleting the emission systems and adding any power gaining parts that you would like to add to your car, allowing weekend motorists to buy street cars for cheap, like a used car, an older car, maybe an old Camaro, and they want to race it, they want to drag race it on drag tracks or on racetracks in order to track their cars for significantly less than purchasing a production race car. The aftermarket part industry also is very large, and many people lose jobs and lose businesses that have been around for generations. So the EPA regulation not only goes after motorists and hobbyists, it also goes after people who create these high performance parts. In one instance, a company had to pay up $48,000 as a settlement towards the EPA for just producing turbochargers and superchargers. All right, so who is SEMA? It's the Specialty Equipment Market Association of the Automobile Aftermarket. Provides services for its member companies such as market research, legislative and regulatory advocacy, and business development. Started in 1963 and now consists of 6,383 companies worldwide. Introduced the RPM Act of 2021, which is fighting the EPA in the House and the Senate in order to reverse a strong majority of their interpretation of the Clean Air Act. All right, so the RPM Act of 2021. Recognizing the Protection of Motorsports Act, aka HR 3281 or S2736. It's bipartisan legislation to protect Americans' right to convert street vehicles into dedicated race cars. So that means, say you own a Honda Civic or a Volkswagen Golf or a BMW. You own that car and you want to race it on the track. You don't have to make it a dedicated race car to race it on a track. You can race street cars on a track, but you're not going to have power gains. It might not handle as well. All these things. Maybe you just want to see what you can do and just go all out and build your car so to race it on a track. That's making it a dedicated race car by making it no longer street legal. And it says the EPA's interpretation of the Clean Air Act says you cannot do that. Even if you make it a dedicated race car, making it not street legal, since it was at one point a street car, that it is illegal for you to delete that emission systems and make it a dedicated race car. But the RPM Act does not interfere with the EPA's authority to enforce against individuals who illegally install race parts on vehicles driven on public roads. So that part is the people who install turbochargers, delete their emission systems, and then race their cars or even drive them on public roads. That is still under the EPA's authority, since they are not dedicated race cars and only driven on a track. All right, so why I chose this topic? I chose this topic because, like many other Americans, I'm turning a street car into a race car. Took this project on with my father as a challenge of our mechanical ability and just as a fun learning experience. I started this earlier this year, and it is slowly making progress, and it's something that I've been wanting to do since I was in high school, and now finally have the means to do it. I'm turning a 2000s BMW 3 Series into a dedicated track car or a race car, and I obviously do not have the money to buy a race car. Not a lot of people do. So it's protecting my right and most Americans' rights to do something that's been a part of American culture since the automobile was invented. To turn a street car into a race car, see what you can do, see how far your knowledge will take you. And that's why organizations like SEMA and the RPM Act of 2021 is so important, to stop the EPA from overreaching into something that does not affect the clean air or the air quality or the environment. When you race a car on the weekend, most of these cars nowadays only marginally break the Emissions Act and are only marginally worse than a road car, and you're not driving them nearly as much. So these cars do not affect the environment, and that's why the RPM Act is so important.